You're sitting in a group conversation. Someone asks you a simple question. Should we go to this restaurant or that one? And while everyone else answers immediately, you're still thinking. Not because you're indecisive, but because your mind just went somewhere else entirely. You're thinking about why you prefer one over the other, what that preference says about you, whether your reasoning is logical or emotional, and suddenly you realize everyone's staring at you waiting for an answer. So you say something quick, something simple, and you feel that familiar disconnect. The gap between what's happening in your mind and what you can actually say out loud. If that sounds familiar, if you've spent your life feeling like your thoughts run deeper than most conversations allow, if you've been called quiet, intense, or overthinking, when really you're just thinking, then you need to understand something. You're not broken. You're not weird. You're just wired differently. Today, we're going to talk about the psychology of deep thinkers, not as some romanticized identity, but as an actual cognitive and emotional experience, what it's really like to live inside a mind that never stops analyzing, and why that's both a gift and a burden. Let's start with what deep thinking actually is, because it's not about being smarter. It's not about complexity for the sake of complexity. Deep thinking is about depth of processing. Psychologists distinguish between two types of cognitive processing. Shallow processing, where you engage with surface-level information, and deep processing, where you analyze meaning, connections, implications, patterns. Most people move between these modes depending on the situation, but deep thinkers default to depth, almost compulsively. You can't hear a statement without questioning it. You can't accept an explanation without examining it. You can't experience something without analyzing what it means. And that's not a choice. It's how your brain operates. This creates a specific kind of experience. Because while everyone else is having a conversation, you're having three simultaneous layers of thought. The conversation itself, your analysis of the conversation, and your analysis of your analysis. And by the time you've processed all of that, the conversation has moved on. So you stay quiet. Not because you have nothing to say, but because what you'd say doesn't fit into the rhythm of normal interaction. Here's what most people don't understand. Deep thinking isn't just an intellectual thing. It's emotional. It's exhausting. It's isolating. Because when you think deeply, you also feel deeply. You don't just notice that someone's upset. You notice the micro expression that revealed it, the tone shift that preceded it, the context that explains it. You're absorbing and processing emotional information that most people don't even register. And that's overwhelming, because you can't turn it off. You can't stop noticing. You can't stop analyzing. You can't stop seeing patterns that no one else seems to see. This is one of those things nobody teaches you. But deep thinkers often struggle with what psychologists call cognitive overload. Your brain is processing so much information simultaneously that it becomes difficult to function in environments that require quick, surface-level responses. Small talk feels impossible, not because you're arrogant, but because your brain won't stay on the surface. Someone asks how your weekend was, and you're already thinking about why we ask these questions, what function they serve socially, whether your answer should be honest or performative. And while you're thinking that, the moment for answering has passed. So you learn to perform. You develop scripts, phrases that sound natural but don't require real thought. And on the outside, you look fine, normal, functional. But on the inside, you're exhausted from the constant translation between what you're actually thinking and what you can say. There's also a profound loneliness that comes with thinking deeply, because most of your thoughts never get expressed. Most of your insights never get shared. Most of your internal world remains invisible. You're constantly having revelations, making connections, understanding things in ways that feel significant. But when you try to explain them, people's eyes glaze over, or they nod politely and change the subject, or they tell you you're overthinking. And maybe you are. But overthinking isn't a choice. It's not something you're doing wrong. It's your brain's default mode. And being told to stop overthinking feels like being told to stop breathing. You wouldn't even know how. Here's where it gets complicated. Deep thinkers often feel like they're watching life from behind glass. Present, but not quite part of it. Because while you're analysing the experience, everyone else is just having it. They're laughing at the joke. You're analysing why it's funny. They're enjoying the moment. You're aware of enjoying it, which creates distance from actually enjoying it. They're living. You're observing yourself living. Psychologists call this metacognition, thinking about thinking. And while it's cognitively sophisticated, it's also alienating, because it creates a layer of separation between you and direct experience. You can't just feel something. You have to understand why you're feeling it. You can't just want something. You have to examine whether that want is authentic or conditioned. You can't just be. You're always analysing being. And that creates a strange paradox. You understand yourself deeply, but you can't experience yourself simply. You have insight, but you've lost immediacy. Now let's talk about why deep thinking develops. Because it's not random, and it's often not a choice you made consciously. Many deep thinkers develop this cognitive style as a survival mechanism. If you grew up in an unpredictable environment, your brain learned to analyze everything, to look for patterns, to predict outcomes, to stay safe by staying aware. If your emotions weren't safe to express, you learned to process them internally, to analyze them, to understand them in isolation, because no one else was going to help you with that. If you experienced early trauma or instability, deep thinking became a way to create order in chaos. A way to feel some control when everything else felt out of control. So what looks like a personality trait is often an adaptation, a coping mechanism that became your default operating system. And here's the thing, it worked. It kept you safe. It helped you survive. But now you're stuck with a mind that never stops working. That can't rest. That treats every situation like it needs to be solved or understood. There's also a temperamental component. Some people are simply born with higher levels of what psychologists call sensory processing sensitivity. You notice more. You feel more. You process more deeply. And in a world that values speed over depth, quick responses over careful thought, that sensitivity becomes a liability. You're told you're too intense, too serious, too much, but you're not too much. You're just processing information that others aren't even aware of, and then being judged for the time it takes to process it. Deep thinkers also struggle with something most people don't talk about: the exhaustion of never being able to turn your mind off. Other people can watch a movie and just watch it. You're analyzing the cinematography, the character motivations, the underlying themes, the social commentary. Other people can have a casual conversation. You're tracking the emotional subtext, the power dynamics, the things being said and not said. And it's not that you want to do this, it's that your brain does it automatically. And by the end of the day, you're mentally exhausted in a way that's hard to explain. Because nothing happened. You didn't do anything particularly strenuous, but your mind has been running at full capacity all day, processing, analyzing, making connections, and now you need to be alone. Not because you're antisocial, but because you need to stop taking in new information to analyze. This is where the stereotype of the quiet, deep thinker comes from. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you've been processing so much that you need silence to integrate it all. Here's another layer most people miss. Deep thinkers often feel like frauds in their own lives because you're so aware of your own thought process that you can see all the contradictions, all the uncertainties, all the places where you're making things up as you go. Other people have the luxury of confidence because they're not examining every belief they hold. But you can't stop examining. You can't stop questioning. You can't stop seeing the complexity in everything. And that makes it hard to commit to anything, hard to believe in anything fully, hard to present yourself as certain when internally you're aware of how uncertain everything is. You see people who seem so sure of themselves, so clear about what they want, so confident in their choices, and you wonder what that's like, because you're never sure. You're always seeing multiple perspectives, always aware of what you might be missing, and that awareness, while intellectually honest, makes it nearly impossible to live with the kind of certainty that most people take for granted. Let's talk about what deep thinkers need that they rarely get. Because understanding the problem doesn't automatically solve it. You need people who can match your depth. Not constantly, but sometimes. People who don't shut down when you go beneath the surface. People who find your intensity interesting instead of exhausting. And those people are rare, because most of the world operates on a different frequency. And when you do find someone who thinks the way you do, it's like finally being able to breathe. Like finding someone who speaks your language. You also need permission to stop performing. To stop pretending your thoughts are simpler than they are. To stop translating everything into digestible pieces. Because the performance is exhausting. Constantly monitoring what you can say and what you can't. What will land and what will make people uncomfortable. What's too much and what's acceptable. And in the rare moments when you can just think out loud, without editing, without performing, without worrying about being too much, it feels like relief. You also need to forgive yourself for not being able to just relax, for not being able to turn it off, for not being able to experience things simply, because you've probably spent years thinking something's wrong with you, that you should be lighter, easier, more fun, less serious. But your depth isn't a flaw. It's not something that needs fixing. It's how you're built. And the world needs people who think deeply, who notice what others miss, who ask questions that make people uncomfortable because they should be uncomfortable. The problem isn't that you think too much. The problem is that you're living in a culture that doesn't value depth. That rewards quick takes over careful analysis. That mistakes simplicity for clarity and depth for pretension. And here's what you need to hear. Being a deep thinker doesn't mean you're better than anyone else, but it also doesn't mean you're worse. It means you process the world differently. And that difference comes with real costs and real gifts. The cost is exhaustion, isolation, the constant feeling of being misunderstood, the inability to just be without analyzing. The gift is insight, pattern recognition, the ability to see connections others miss, the capacity for profound understanding. And whether that trade-off feels worth it probably depends on the day. Some days, you'd give anything to just turn it off, to experience something without dissecting it, to be present without being aware of being present. Other days, you wouldn't trade it, because this is how you make sense of the world. This is how you find meaning. This is how you connect the dots that others can't see. So, if you're a deep thinker, know this: you're not alone, even though it feels like it. There are others like you, quietly processing, silently analyzing, thinking 3 layers deeper than the conversation. And the world needs what you see, even if it doesn't always know how to receive it. You don't have to become someone else. You don't have to think less deeply. You just have to find the people and spaces where your depth is welcomed instead of tolerated, where your insights are valued instead of dismissed, where you can finally stop translating and just speak. Because you're not too much, you're not overthinking, you're not weird, you're just awake in a world that's mostly asleep. And that's uncomfortable, but it's also necessary. The question isn't whether you should stop thinking deeply, it's whether you're ready to stop apologizing for it. If this resonated, drop a comment. Are you a deep thinker? How do you navigate a world that doesn't always value depth? And if this helped, subscribe for more conversations about the psychology of being human.